A Christmas Prince is a trilogy set within Netflix rom-com cinematic universe. Now, their rom-com cinematic universe tends to center around Christmas as well, but unlike classic Christmas movies like Miracle on 34th Street or The Santa Claus, they are not set in our universe. They are set in a parallel universe, a parallel Earth, where history played out very differently to how it did in our universe. The third installment of the trilogy revealed this map showing what Europe looks like in this dimension. And as you can see, it's very different from our universe. For instance, the countries of former Yugoslavia, and further than that, also the former Austro-Hungarian Empire, they don't exist. They are Aldovia, the country that is the main setting for the Christmas Prince trilogy. So in this universe, there is no Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, Hungary, Austria. It is Aldovia. This is the country in which these films are set. Now we're going to take a look at the differences between our universe and the universe of Netflix rom-com cinematic universe. It's established that Aldovia does not have a military. It's unclear how long this has been true for. It seems to be related to the war with Penglia. They obviously both had militaries at some point when they were at war 600 years ago, but at this time, they don't. Which makes me wonder, was Aldovia able to defend itself during World War II? Also, whose side was Aldovia on during World War II? But for that matter, did World War II even happen? For one thing, Hitler was Austrian, but in this universe, that means Hitler would have been born Aldovian, and the various countries that make up, in this universe, Aldovia, were in very different positions during World War II. But actually, judging from the map, there are only 3 existing countries in Europe at all: Aldovia, Belgravia, and Penglia. At first I thought maybe this map only referenced these 3 countries because it was specifically about the treaty between Penglia and Aldovia, but Belgravia has nothing to do with the treaty and isn't actually mentioned at all in relation to the treaty. So this does appear to be, in fact, a map of Europe. My interpretation is that there are only these 3 countries in Europe, and the rest of Europe is kind of an anarchist free land, including Italy very clearly from the image. Now again, this is just my interpretation, but I'm starting to wonder if the war between Aldovia and Penglia was actually much greater than we could ever have anticipated. The war destroyed Italy and much of Europe. The Aldovia-Penglia Treaty is perhaps so important because when these 2 states are at war with each other, they destroy the continent. It's clear from the films that the 2 nations very much want to be at war with each other, and the only thing keeping them from that is this signed treaty.
If we don't stay to sign the truce treaty, our kingdoms technically return to a state of war. Of course, a war that would be fought by lawyers.
I would propose a hypothesis that the United Kingdom never actually existed. The reason English is spoken predominantly in Aldovia is because the British Isles were not populated by Germanic descendants. Instead, they moved towards the Balkans. It's possible that in this universe, Aldovia basically is the United Kingdom. It's a parallel universe United Kingdom that exists in the Balkans rather than on the British Isles. However, French has a rather large influence on the English language, and the proximity between England and France is probably the reason for that, so we have to explore other options. English is the predominant language in Aldovia, which implies to me a British occupation of the Balkans. However, when Britain occupies or colonizes a land, they don't set up a new monarchy, right? There is no king or queen of Canada, that's Queen Elizabeth. So I would think that there was some kind of secession from the British Empire if the British Empire ever existed to begin with. However, it's also possible that Richard's line is descended from the Karađorđević dynasty of Serbia. This monarchy remained in place but was influenced by some kind of British occupation. Similar to the issue with the military, there doesn't appear to be any kind of police force in Aldovia. Crimes are handled primarily by butlers and serving staff in the castle, and criminals are sent to the dungeon, presumably to die. Slovenian actress Katarina Čas is featured in the second film as the chef, and she plays it with a thick Slovenian accent, whereas all the other characters who are native to Aldovia have English British accents. I'm wondering if this is intentional on the part of the film's creators to hire a Slavic actress in order to imply that there are still native Slavic languages in the Balkans, and it's simply that the oppressive forces of the English upper classes are repressing those languages, similar to how the Italians oppressed the Slovenians on the borders and wouldn't allow them to speak their native language. Aldovia doesn't seem to have any exports. All the money, all the businesses are Aldovian and they're kept within Aldovia. So when money starts leaving the country, no one has any idea what to think or what to do because they've never had money enter or leave their country before. Aldovia is both a major player on the European stage and unbelievably isolated. Does the European Union exist? Are there only 3 members? The castle and other exterior shots for the films are filmed in Romania. And I think it's fair to argue, based on the geography, that that is where the films are set, in what would be, in our universe, Romania. Which brings me to another question. In their universe, did Bram Stoker exist? And if he did he write Dracula, which is set in Romania? If so, then in this universe, Aldovia is the home of the modern vampire mythology, which perhaps explains why the country is so eager, nay desperate, to rebrand itself in Christmas tradition. This is a devoutly Christian nation that has been associated worldwide with this demonic mythology, and they are ready to shed themselves of that burden. The Aldovian flag closely resembles the Nigerian flag. Now, in our dimension, Nigeria was occupied for a time by the British Empire, and I'm wondering if this flag reference is a suggestion that in their universe, Aldovia is who occupied Nigeria. Hopefully the next film will have major plot lines revolving around the Aldovian occupation of Nigeria, vampire mythology, and even the classism surrounding the Slavic ethnic group native to the Balkans. Now, Penglia is another country which is only featured in the 3rd film. It exists in a region that primarily takes up a chunk of Western Russia, Georgia, and a little bit of Armenia. In our dimension, these regions are dominated by the Slavic ethnic groups and the Georgian ethnic group. But in the Netflix rom-com cinematic universe, this region is primarily East Asian, both in ethnicity and I think culture as well. The names of the Penglian characters are essentially Chinese. One must assume that over 600 years ago, maybe 700-800 years ago, or even further back, the Chinese came into this region and occupied it, displacing the ethnic groups that were already there. It's worth noting that the Caspian Sea on this map is shaped significantly differently than that in our universe, which I believe was a clever comment on the part of the filmmakers to suggest that not only is the history of this world different from ours, but the geography is as well, which says to me that our diverging timelines diverged millions of years ago, rather than just a few hundred. Now, if you think about Amber Moore living in an America that's essentially the same as the America in our dimension, you still have to take into consideration that celebrity figures, popular figures from the present day and history, came from different places. For instance, if Trump is president, then his wife Melania, she's not from Slovenia, she's from Aldovia. Nikola Tesla was Aldovian. That guy from ER is Aldovian. Andy Warhol was of Aldovian descent. The main character's name, Moore, is an English name in origin. However, in this universe, it's just as realistic to suggest that maybe she is also of Aldovian descent. Does Eurovision exist in this universe? These 3 competing countries alone? And if so, did Conchita Wurst win for Aldovia? My point is simply this. You cannot watch this film like Miracle on 34th Street. It is to be watched more similarly to the film Watchmen, where it is set in a parallel universe where things played out differently, perhaps equally or more devastating and violently than they did in our universe. Indeed, I think A Christmas Prince is a cautionary tale as to how the history and the politics of a nation can take many shapes and forms, but how does that affect our humanity as Europeans, as Americans.
I hereby condemn this snowman to death by firing squad.
I hope to see these issues addressed again and again in perhaps a follow-up trilogy directed by J.J. Abrams.